You need a mobile phone, and you love to save.
Jonathan Petromale in Rosemary Beach, Florida. It's just to the west from Panama City, and behind me, a graffiti history of the storms that this restaurant, the Terrace Restaurant, has went through over the years. It starts with Hurricane Ivan back in 2004. Most recently, of course, Hurricane was due to be able to add another name for another storm after they survived this one.
So this
Hurricane Michael live updates, Category 4 storm lashes Florida. Conditions deteriorate in Florida Panhandle as unprecedented Category 4 Hurricane Michael nears landfall. Major Hurricane Michael, an unprecedented storm, is bearing down on the Florida Panhandle as an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane. Michael is expected to make landfall near Panama City, Florida, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. CDT Wednesday. Should Michael's eye cross the coast as a Category 4 hurricane, it would be the first time on record for such an occurrence over the Big Bend area of Florida's coast, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Alex Sosnowski. Michael is a historic storm. A Category 4 hurricane has never struck that part of Florida. The coastline will be changed for decades, AccuWeather Vice President of Forecasting and Graphics Operations Marshall Moss said. The storm will bring sustained winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour with gusts of 120 to 160 miles per hour to parts of the Florida Panhandle, mostly within 40 miles of where Michael makes landfall. The strongest gusts are likely just to the east of the center. This will lead to widespread tree and structural damage. States of emergency have been declared in parts of Florida, Georgia, Alabama and the Carolinas. Mandatory evacuations are in effect along much of Florida's northern Gulf Coast. Several thousand power outages and tropical storm force wind gusts have already been reported in parts of northwestern Florida. There may be prolonged power outages that could last for several days. Wind damage will be on a more localized level as Michael moves across the Carolinas and Virginia. However, any weakened structures left behind from Florence will be at the highest risk for damage. The last Category 4 hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. in October was Hurricane Hazel, which slammed the Carolinas in 1954. Hurricane Michael live updates, Category 4 storm lashes Florida. Conditions deteriorate in Florida Panhandle as unprecedented Category 4 Hurricane Michael nears landfall. Major Hurricane Michael, an unprecedented storm, is bearing down on the Florida Panhandle as an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane. Michael is expected to make landfall near Panama City, Florida, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. CDT Wednesday. Should Michael's eye cross the coast as a Category 4 hurricane, it would be the first time on record for such an occurrence over the Big Bend area of Florida's coast, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Alex Sosnowski. Michael is a historic storm. A Category 4 hurricane has never struck that part of Florida. The coastline will be changed for decades, AccuWeather Vice President of Forecasting and Graphics Operations Marshall Moss said. The storm will bring sustained winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour with gusts of 120 to 160 miles per hour to parts of the Florida Panhandle, mostly within 40 miles of where Michael makes landfall. The strongest gusts are likely just to the east of the center. This will lead to widespread tree and structural damage. States of emergency have been declared in parts of Florida, Georgia, Alabama and the Carolinas. Mandatory evacuations are in effect along much of Florida's northern Gulf Coast. Several thousand power outages and tropical storm force wind gusts have already been reported in parts of northwestern Florida. There may be prolonged power outages that could last for several days. Wind damage will be on a more localized level as Michael moves across the Carolinas and Virginia. However, any weakened structures left behind from Florence will be at the highest risk for damage. The last Category 4 hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. in October was Hurricane Hazel, which slammed the Carolinas in 1954.
Is a monster, and it's not going away. There's nothing that shows us it's going to get whacked before it makes landfall.
That is storm tracker Jim Cantori from Panama City Beach commenting on this massive storm, Hurricane Michael, now with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. Just take a second to think about that. It continues to move off to the north-northeast at 14 miles per hour. This is as dangerous pretty much as it gets, everybody. And we have since seen the power outages in Florida basically double with just the past hour. More than 30,000 people already without power in Florida. And the power outages, of course, are going to go well beyond that through Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. It's going to move in quickly and get out of the way quickly, but Michael looks likely to make it to the top 10 list of most intense hurricane landfalls on record. The surge forecast could certainly go beyond these projections. So yeah, we could see storm surge that goes beyond 9 to 14 feet. That is a very real possibility. And the rainfall outlooks could also go beyond potentially more than a foot. Some of the projections of more than a foot could actually equate to more than that. And look at how far out the rainfall projections go, and those big totals of 5 to 8 inches potentially up into the Carolinas. And we also have to talk about tornadoes. There are possible tornadoes on the right side of Michael's track, not necessarily limited to just there, and those threats will extend into Thursday for some locations.
he's transformed this community that's been in so much pain.
Well, if anyone deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, it's Dr. Denis Mukwege. And as you mentioned, he is a joint recipient of this. His work with victims of sexual violence in conflict areas is incredible and remarkable. And it's just so good to have, in a way, some good news from this continent, because we're always talking to you about
as you can see in this one right here, sir, and then it will go through Georgia and the Carolinas. Unfortunately, on the tail end, we do expect additional rain in the Carolinas, which will lead to additional flooding. FEMA's leaning forward, as we are with our interagency partners. We're forward deployed, we're search and rescue ready to go. We're in very close contact with the state and local authorities. We've all spoken with the governor and local officials. And I'll turn it over to Brock.
Thanks, Secretary. Unfortunately, this is a Gulf Coast hurricane of the worst kind because all of the elements associated with hurricanes come into play. So, as you see on the left, the storm surge estimates are anywhere between 9 and 14 feet. Storm surge is going to be the worst where the eye makes landfall, just to the east or south of where the eye makes landfall. Somewhere right now it's projected between Panama City, Apalachicola, and then it's going to push forward. So not only is it going to bring 14 feet of ocean water and coastal flood inundation, there'll be wave action on top of that, which is the primary driver of why we evacuate, sir. And then coupled with that, you've got over 145 mile per hour winds. Structures built before 2001 are not designed a Cat 1, Cat 2 storm as it moves inland. And with the vegetation there, what we're anticipating is a lot of downed trees impacting the power grid. And here again, we're going to see a lot of devastation along the coast structurally. And then as it moves in, you're going to see power outages throughout the state. And then unfortunately, you're going to see rainfall into South Carolina and North Carolina. The Cape Fear was projected to start receding from Hurricane Florence 2 days ago, and this will basically exacerbate the problem and add to it a little bit to where it's going to keep those waters from receding a little bit as it exits the state by Friday.
So they're reporting that this is one of the most powerful hurricanes ever to hit our country. Is that actually a fact?
Well, so in this area, this would be the most intense hurricane that's struck this area since 1851, if I remember correctly. So this would be intense, very intense. But
this one is going to be heavy rain, or is it going to be the winds that are going to be the problem?
Storm surge and winds. And then for Georgia, they're going to see high inland winds. So you may see sustained Category 1, Category 2 winds with higher gusts that are associated. So we're expecting a lot of damage inland as well. But we have leaned forward with Governor Scott and his staff and Director Westmall down in Florida. They've been leaning forward as well. And, right now there's no identified shortfalls when it comes to pre-positioning. So we have teams, equipment, personnel, not only with and embedded with state of Florida staff and some of the local county emergency managers, but we have equipment and teams staged in Maxwell to Atlanta to Orlando, ready to move in once the elements subside and push through, and then we can move in and attack.
And we're working really closely with the private sector. So about 14 states, different utilities from 14 states are already ready to help with any energy outages.
Electric companies are from all over the country, actually. They're all lined up. As soon as it goes by, they're going to be working. And we've got food supplies, food chains. We're working with all of the states. And this started out very innocently a week ago. This was a small storm in an area they never thought. They said it grew into a monster.
Right, so the first initial indications from the National Hurricane Center started coming in around Saturday. And they picked it up and started raising the flag that, hey, this system's going to go from a wave to a depression and could potentially rapidly intensify. And unfortunately, that's typical of the Gulf Coast. And when they do this, those citizens have less time to prepare or heed the warnings. We are concerned that many citizens chose not to heed those warnings, but we're prepared with search and rescue teams to try to go in and do what we can.
Any questions, please?
Yesterday, we were concerned that we did not like the level of evacuation activity that we were seeing, and Governor Scott, kudos to him. He leaned forward, used the new wireless emergency alert capabilities that we have, and sent out text messaging last night. Leaned forward and said, hey, get out of there. And so we were trying to get people to really take the storm seriously. A lot of people did heed the warning, but then there are those who chose to stay behind. And unfortunately, first responders may not be able to go in and rescue those who dial 911 at this point.
I have, and the other governors, depending on what happens here, but they are all either contacted or are in the process. I had a long talk with Rick Scott, Governor Scott of Florida, very well coordinated with all of the states. And, one of the things that must be said is it's not so easy for some of these people to leave. Some of the areas are very poor. Not easy for a person without the necessary money to leave. So what we've done is we've sent buses, we've sent a lot of different, we're doing a lot of different things to try and remove people from the area, but a lot of people are very poor in certain of those areas, and it's very tough for them to leave. That's one of the problems you're finding, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, in some cases, what we ask to do on Blue Sky Days is ask people who may not have the means or the mechanisms to get out of town to register with their local emergency management agencies, and Florida's been pretty robust in doing that so that we have some idea of how to pre-plan for that. And then, we do what we can to be able to support the movement of people. When it comes to Georgia, we're not evacuating for storm surge in Georgia. This is going to be high winds, so we're asking people to get within a facility that can withstand the winds and try to shelter in place or seek out public shelters that may be open in Southwest Georgia.
But if you look at the size, how long it is, take a look at that, and the red area basically is the area where it's going to hit pretty heavily, and that's a lot of shore. It's a lot of land.
There'll be 4 feet in storm surge all the way down to Tampa Bay, which, as you know, is very low lying and floods very easily. But to give you that idea of the breadth of its path, it is quite large.
It's almost the entire size of the Gulf. When you look at it topically, it's almost the entire size of the Gulf, and they haven't seen that. Maybe they haven't seen that at all. Nobody's seen that before.
The diameter is pretty wide, which unfortunately is not good news as it makes landfall. So some people may say it's similar to an EF3 tornado making landfall in areas that are close to the eye. So it's
Did last year's hurricanes in the area impair the infrastructure or weaken it in any way that they would struggle to deal with this year's hurricane?
not in this area. Irma did not really heavily impact the Florida Panhandle. Most of the hit from Irma was in the southwest portion of Florida, and then moved up through and created some issues in the Jacksonville area, northeastern portion. But this area, it's been a long time since it's been hit, so the vegetation hasn't been stressed, and we're going to see, a lot of damage and devastation, unfortunately. And we have to set the citizens' expectations that the power is going to be out for a while. And what FEMA's role in that is, as the Secretary was saying, our partnership with the private sector is that, we work with the Florida Power and Lights, the Gulf Powers, the Southern companies, the Georgia Powers, to be able to help them, facilitate their mutual aid to come in. And they've got power crews coming in from multiple states across the country that are already pre-staged. And when we're hit, we work with them to do what's called first push debris to get the roadways open and so that we can get them down the roadways to start fixing the power. But that's going to take some time.
Mr. President, do you plan on changing any of your travel schedule?
Well, we don't know. I know I was going to Pennsylvania. It looks like there are thousands of people already lined up, and probably will do that tonight. And we're going to go down here as soon as we can. We don't want to interfere with anybody, but we want to go as soon as possible. You have, right nearby, we have thousands of people going tonight, and many are there already. What time were you going to be there? What time were we planning on that?
The rally tonight is scheduled at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's about 7. Well, I don't know what to do because you have so many people already there, and it's sort of unfair to them. So it's a mix. I'll be totally focused on this, but we're going to make a determination over the next little while. But you had people that.
Is it more difficult for you to pay attention to storms you're doing?
No, because I have great people, including these two, but I have great people. It wouldn't make any difference in that sense, but I would like to be seeing what's going on. We want to get down there as soon as possible. At the same time, I don't want to go down where we're interfering with the people, first responders, the FEMA people. I want them to focus on the storm, not me. So we'll probably look to Sunday or Monday to go down and meet with the governors, meet with everybody, and do what we have to do, like we did in North Carolina, South Carolina, where that worked out really well. Now, they're going to get hit also. I mean, North Carolina and South Carolina are going to get a lot of water. Nothing like they had 2 weeks ago, but they're going to get a lot of water also. And that water is still draining out. So this is a pretty big problem. I really worry a little bit about South Carolina and North Carolina from the standpoint they're already saturated, and they're going to get a reasonable hit, right?
Right, yeah. They will. So you're going to see as much as possibly 8 inches in isolated areas through South Carolina and North Carolina. And as I said, it's all about the rivers being able to process the water from Florence, and some of them haven't had the time to do that. So this doesn't help.
President Trump, should Saudi Arabia release journalist Craig Badawi?
I will have to take a look at it exactly. when you say release the journalist, who are you talking
They
about?
have imprisoned a journalist named Raif Badawi, and they...
That I'd have to look into. I'm not familiar with
Can I
that.
ask you about Jamal Khashoggi?
Yes.
Are you concerned that he's dead, and do you hold the Saudi government?
I would be certainly concerned, and in fact, we have a call-in to his wife. His wife wrote us a letter and addressed it to my wife and myself, and we're in contact with her now, and we want to bring her to the White House. It's a very sad situation. It's a very bad situation, and we want to get to the bottom of it.
Do you think he's dead, Mr.
I don't want to say that. I hope he's not. I hope he's
Hold
not.
the Saudi government responsible?
Well, I have to find out who did it, but people saw him go in, but they didn't see him come out, as they understand it, and we're going to take a very serious look at it. It's a terrible thing.
Have you spoken to the Saudis?
I'd rather not say, but the answer is yes.
Can you give us a sense of when his wife, fiance, might be coming?
I would say fairly quickly. They're in touch. You may just speak to the First Lady's folks because they're in touch, and she'll be most likely coming to the White House. We'll work on it together. It's a terrible
Lindsey
thing.
Graham says there will be help to pay if the Saudis are in fact responsible. Do you share that view?
Well, and Lindsey can speak for himself, but this is a bad situation. We cannot let this happen. To reporters, to anybody, we can't let this happen. And we're going to get to the bottom of it, okay? But you may want to speak to the First Lady's office about the... I'd rather not say, but at a very high level, the highest level. Let me say this, it's the highest level, okay? Yeah.
You mentioned that you talked to
More than once.
You had mentioned that you spoke to King Salman, so I mean.
Well, I do anyway, and I've always found him to be a fine man. We've had a very good relationship. I'm not happy about this. We have to see what happens. You know, we have to see what happens. Nobody knows what happened yet. They don't know over there, but it's a very serious situation, and it's something we're taking very seriously. Okay?
Mr. President, several countries like India and China are planning to buy oil from Iran before. What is the message to this?
We'll take care of that. We'll take care of that. Yeah.
There's a report out of Seoul today that the South Korean government is considering lifting some sanctions against the South Korean government.
Well, they won't do it without our approval. They do nothing without our approval.
Have they been in contact?
Yes, they do nothing without our approval. Okay?
Any plans to release more people like Alice Johnson?
We'll talk to you about that later.
Are you getting closer to picking a replacement?
And by the way, when we get Alice Johnson, such a great person, or such a great case, I'd like to find a lot of people like Alice Johnson, and there are a lot of people that are in a situation like that, and we are actively looking for those situations. She's a terrific woman. I've been watching her a lot, and what a great spokesman she is for that situation, and that's covering a lot of people. There are a lot of people like that that will unfortunately be locked up for many, many years, and there's no reason for it. So we are looking for, we are actively looking for other situations exactly like that. No, but she's somebody we're talking to. We like Dina. Dina did great here. She then went back into the private sector for a while, but she always wanted to come back. She loves this administration. So we're certainly looking at Dina, and we're looking at others. There's some tremendously talented people. Nikki's going to be here till the end of the year. Nikki's our friend. She's been great. I want whoever it is to spend some time with Nikki before Nikki goes out and gets herself a job, and hopefully she's going to make a lot of money. And I think Nikki will come back in some form too. But she's an extraordinary person, good person, and but we're looking at many people. Many people want that job.
Mr. President, are you concerned about the fact that she announced her departure before the midterms?
No, there's no good time. I mean, there really is no good time. She told me about this a long time ago, and frankly, it's almost 4 weeks, so it's not that bad. No, I don't think so at all. I thought it was very elegantly done. If she waited till after, then they'd say, oh, if we win, they'd say, why is she doing it? And if we lose, they'd say, oh, well, that's obvious why she's doing it. Okay, so there's really no good time to do it. But She and I had spoken at least 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago we had conversations. She wanted to be here about 2 years. And I think the point really was last week at the United Nations. She wanted to get through that and then go probably into the private sector for a while. And I'm sure she's going to come back into government because she's a terrific person.
What's the vetting process like, Mr. President? What are you looking for?
Very strong vetting, but some of the people we already have vetted. Some of the people are with us. We're looking at people that are already with us. And we have some incredible talent in this administration. We have some great talent, and they've already been vetted. They're already approved. Any other questions on this?
Last week, India signed an agreement with Russia to purchase S-400 missiles.
Yeah, I know they did. Yeah.
Would CATSA sanctions apply to India, or are you planning to?
India's going to find out, aren't they?
Are you planning to give them a waiver?
India will find out.
When?
You'll see. Sooner than you think.
I do have another question on this.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about the size and the scope of it. Can you help us understand just how big it's going to be? Florence was a historic storm. Is it going to be bigger than Florence? How should we think about the size of the storm?
Oh, for this area, the Florida Panhandle, it's going to be historic. I mean, this is the worst hit that they've had in recent history, and you've only it's Cat 4 going in.
This is an ABC News special report. Hurricane Michael.
And good afternoon to you, Dewan, and Barbara. Good afternoon to you. Let's show you the latest radar picture. We're looking at Panama City radar, actually Tallahassee radar, and this is National Weather Service radar. The eye of the storm getting very close now to Panama City. We'll zoom down in and put this into motion. You can see the eye wall out here churning. That's where the highest winds are right now, west of Apalachicola, expected to go in somewhere in this area. But the rain field extends all the way back to almost the Alabama border in Pensacola, and they see showers as far south as Tampa. Let's look at the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Maximum sustained winds as of noon, now up another 5 miles an hour. It continues to be very strong, 50-mile-an-hour winds. Category 4, getting closer, 5, 75. It is moving north-northeast at 14 miles an hour. And the pressure, if it makes landfall at this pressure, this will be the lowest air pressure we've seen with a hurricane in 150 years of record keeping in the month of October. So it's just a massive, nasty storm. Now, that heavy rain proceeds across us through the afternoon hours. By 3, 4, 5 o'clock, we see that it continuing through 9, 10 o'clock tomorrow night. The showers are shutting off in the Triangle and Sandhills. They're done late evening. By midnight, it's starting to pull out of here, but it could put down some very heavy rainfall. How much? We're talking 2 to 5 inches of rain possible through this orange area, a little bit less down to the south. It will have weakened just a bit, but even with 2 to 5 inches, that does mean you could see flash flooding. And because of that, the National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch for the entire area, almost the entire state, for tomorrow.
Florence was an epic storm that brought unprecedented widespread disaster. Although we mourn the 40 storm-related deaths, we know that flood mapping, monitoring, preparation, early warnings and evacuations, and rescues saved countless lives. Our thanks go to the coordinated efforts of our Emergency Operations Center and our local, state, federal, volunteer, faith-based, and business partners. The human suffering and property damage left in the wake of Florence was like nothing we have ever seen before. Our efforts in recovery must be just as unique and bold. Our recovery should reflect the determination and the unshakable will of North Carolinians. I've been visiting a lot of people in the impacted counties, first responders, volunteers handing out hot meals, families surveying devastation to homes, businesses, churches, and farms. I've heard heartbreaking stories of loss, amazing stories of brave rescues, and inspiring stories of resilience. A senior I talked to in a shelter told me about being rescued from her home by a brave firefighter in Wilmington while water rushed in under her door. All this possessions she had left sitting in that shelter were carried out in her hands within 15 minutes. Although she now had next to nothing materially, she sat there, looked at me, and thanked her God, her friends, and the volunteers for helping her. So many of the men and women working at shelters or at 911 centers or local emergency operations centers or as first responders had their own flooded homes and families to worry about. But they knew that they had to pitch in and help their communities. They were doing their jobs. Now it's time for state government to step up and do ours. An unprecedented storm requires an unprecedented response. When you've had 2 years like we've had in North Carolina, rebuilding smarter and stronger isn't just an idea, it's an obligation. With this obligation in mind, we've assembled a smarter and stronger state budget recommendation for Hurricane Florence recovery. Our preliminary estimate of damages in North Carolina from Hurricane Florence totals almost $13 billion. Florence has caused as much damage as Hurricane Floyd and Matthew combined. Now, some of that damage is covered by private insurance, and we'll continue working with our congressional delegation to maximize the federal help. But we know that we will be left with unmet needs, and our state needs to step up. To do that, I'm recommending a long-term $1.5 billion funding package that will ensure that we are rebuilding stronger and smarter. Next week, I'll ask legislators to make a $750 million down payment into a Hurricane Florence recovery fund. Will be there when we need them. My state budget director, Charlie Perouse, is here to go through with the details, and I'm grateful for the work that he and the finance agency. One of the best ways to mitigate damage is to avoid rebuilding in flood areas. So I'm proposing more for the state acquisition and relocation home by supplement to federal funds. I grew up in eastern North Carolina, and as a kid, I worked on the farm. Farms. Our farmers were devastated by Florence, on top of the tough times that they have suffered through in the last few years. I recommend a robust North Carolina Farmer Recovery and Reinvestment Program run by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, which would provide direct payments to farmers for equipment and crop losses. I also know that just like homes, businesses, infrastructure, farms need to be more resilient. We need to create a North Carolina Farmer Resiliency Fund that would expand the voluntary buyout program for hog farmers into 5, or to convert from open lagoons to environmentally superior technology. In addition to damaged homes and farms, Florence caused more than 2,500 road closures, including Interstates 40 and 95. Our Department of Transportation worked overtime to fix them. But we have to focus on making our roadways more resilient. I recommend additional funding to leverage federal money to design roads, bridges, pipes, and other structures to better withstand extreme weather events. And repair money is approved at the federal and state levels Local governments sometimes struggle to distribute it to people because of the lack of personnel and expertise in doing this. Today's recommendation includes funding that can help local governments run these vital federal programs and hire people to get the job done. This funding is in addition to our proposed grants for local projects like water, sewer, sidewalks, and stormwater drainage. Now we know that Florence hurt education as well. There are more than 680 public schools, 28 community colleges, and 4 University of North Carolina institutions located in disaster counties. As of today, 7 school systems remain closed, keeping more than 130 schools out of operation and nearly 90,000 students out of class. On Monday, I directed $25 million from the Education Lottery Fund to speed repairs at public schools so they can reopen. They need the money in the bank in order to let the contracts. I'm proposing significant help for all of these education institutions. And when we're thinking about the future, there's more we can do to prevent the overall damage from flooding. During Florence, we know that our flood mapping worked to help save lives. As rivers were rising, emergency managers and first responders could evacuate people before their homes filled with water. I recommend updating flood modeling capabilities that expedite potential real-time impacts to homes, roads, and utilities. Today's recommendation also calls for beginning mitigation projects along our rivers. Finally, we have a hard-working staff at Emergency Management, led by Mr. Mike Sprayberry, who focus every day on disaster recovery, while at the same time, immediate emergency response, like we just saw with Florence and like we're starting to do with Michael. With 2 back-to-back storms and another one heading here even today, we know that we can expect more extreme weather events. To put laser focus on recovery after the response, we're creating an Office of Recovery and Resilience to serve as a sister organization to the Department of Emergency Management. With this, we can help draw down more federal resources and ensure that money is getting to the people who need it as quickly as possible. Today's budget recommendation is a robust and common sense approach to Hurricane Florence recovery. It's one piece of the recovery puzzle that's vital to seeing the whole picture. We'll continue to work with our federal partners for resources that North Carolina desperately needs. We'll continue seeking help from private and nonprofit sources. But it is imperative to set aside state funding to make sure that North Carolina is made whole. I'm grateful for those who worked long hours to put together this damage assessment in record time, state agencies, schools, economists, and local governments, and especially our state budget and management team that I mentioned earlier. I am committed to working with this legislature to ensure that North Carolina is a model for how we can rebuild smarter and stronger. I'm now going to call up Charlie Perouse, who is going to brief us with some more details and funding totals. So Charlie, you want to come on up? And before that, because I will leave when Charlie begins, he and I both will take questions that you might have. And Charlie will also take questions after his presentation. Yes, for me. And or if I may need Charlie to help me supplement.
Okay, I'm sure some of these questions will be answered with Charlie, but so you're talking about asking for $750 next week.
That's right.
And you want $1.5 billion, I assume for what? From the long session in 19 or?
It'll be over a period of time, and I think we can work with how that is going to be distributed. And for this $750 million, part of it would come from the rainy day fund, and part of it would come from budget overages that Charlie can tell you about.
No taxes or
No.
increase required.
No.
And then also, have you presented this package yet to the legislature?
On the staff level, we have, yes.
And what has been the response? I'm sure we can ask, but
I think they are looking at it. They are getting a lot of the same information that we are. And this is my proposal that we put it out early enough so we've got time to work on it before they officially go into session next week. Because I'm sure they're going to have some suggestions about what we ought to do as well.
Governor, at the legislative hearing yesterday, I think it was, there was some concern about the agriculture package that was presented, concern about oversight and checks and balances and all that. Are you building that into these programs, and you think you can assure legislators or just kind of screenshot about that?
I believe that we are at a unique period for North Carolina agriculture. The culmination of damage that they've suffered from the trade wars to Hurricane Matthew and now hit by Hurricane Florence. Many of them will be teetering on the verge of going out of business. So I agree with the commissioner that we need a robust fund to provide direct help to farmers that are not covered by private insurance and federal funds. And I've talked with the commissioner about this a couple of times. He is working on a fair way to distribute it. I support this effort, and you'll see that in my budget for that particular fund. We're recommending $200 million, but Charlie will tell you about that. Yes, sir.
I believe the permitting process for the lagoons is underway, but when you talk about buying out, will that be used as some sort of leverage, that re-permitting process that happens every so often to push farmers toward that?
You know, I'm going to let the Department of Environmental Quality address that because they're responsible for the permitting. But we know that removing some hog farms from the 100-year floodplain was successful. We think that if we expand that to the 500-year floodplain, we'll have more success in moving hog farms out of harm's way. And we want to combine that with incentives for switching to environmentally superior technology. So that would be part of this fund effort as well. And remember too, we're talking about trying to provide clean water to people. The hog lagoon spills cause problems. Wastewater treatment plants, our local municipalities spilled into the rivers. We've got to help them be more resilient, and our package provides for that. So there are a lot of challenges in flood-prone areas, and we need now to be more resilient in all of our wastewater, both animal and human.
And then connected to that, is there any desire or willingness, or maybe even a necessity to lift the moratorium on new lagoons in order to get them into a different geography, into a different place?
Well, I think that's thinking a little bit far down the road. I would not say we should do that at this point, because we are going to be talking about more buyouts, and we're going to be talking about environmentally superior technology and state funding for that. Because remember, when you're talking about environmentally superior technology for hog lagoons, under their contracts, this falls on the farmer and not on the company. So we need to help when we're encouraging this to happen, and we need to help when we're encouraging buyouts out of the 500-year floodplain.
One of the concerns about making buyouts work is having a place for people to go.
Right.
And is part of the housing plan moving forward with building housing sustained in their community.
Absolutely. A lot of, in order to have buyouts in communities, you have to get the local government permission for this to happen. And many of the local governments are concerned about losing population when buyouts occur. So what we want to do, though, is to encourage more buyouts and or elevations in areas where that would happen, because I saw a lot of the homes that had been elevated in prior storms that avoided damage in Florence, and so now they are not in our damage column. So we know that this works. But with buyouts too, there can be other places where towns can go. Already in Princeville, they've had a number of buyouts they've made. It was a tough decision for their local governments to make, but they finally decided on some buyouts, and now there's a 53-acre contiguous tract where they're going to work to try to move some people from that historic town to this place. So there are ways that we can get people out of harm's way while still creating affordable housing. And through the Housing Finance Agency, through programs that have been set up through the federal and our state efforts, if we work on it and we fund it and we get it going, affordable housing can help our economy soar, and it can get people living conditions that they deserve. This was a problem before the storm, and this storm magnified it. So now let's take this opportunity and get people out of harm's way and get them into other affordable housing. We can do that.
Governor, with the understanding that this is in a lot of ways a neighborhood by neighborhood and a house by house process, what is the philosophy as far as, do you see people resettling from these buyouts in the same basic area? Do you see them moving to the cities? We talk a lot about how the jobs are in the big cities in North Carolina and not in the rural. Do you see any sort of an exodus, a reshuffling of population because of this?
I think that you're going to have some people moving out of flooded areas just simply to escape the floods, with or without buyouts, because
Fox 13 Weather Center. Thanks for logging on to myfoxhurricane.com. So we continue to watch this intensifying hurricane. That's about as bad of a situation as you can get. We've got a landfalling hurricane that is continuing to intensify. Hurricane reconnaissance planes been flying in this system essentially nonstop at this point, and they are continuing to watch the pressure fall in this storm, and that is indicative of a strengthening system. We're still watching these winds slowly increasing in this storm. You can see on that visible satellite loop the center just off the coast of Panama City right now. Here's another view, the enhanced satellite loop. Very, very intense. The colder cloud top showing up in that purple magenta shade. So this is an extremely intense hurricane, Category 4 right now, and unfortunately pretty much all the predictions that we've been talking about for several days now look like they are going to come true, with this major hurricane devastation across the Panhandle as it nears the coastline, and then the storm surge as well everywhere pretty much to the right of the center. Now, about the only piece of maybe positive information that we are seeing with this is we're starting to see signs of maybe an outer eye wall trying to form with this system. Now, this looks like it may start to go through an eye wall replacement cycle so close to the coastline we're not going to see that actually complete, but if we're seeing the signs that it's starting one, that could mean it's leveling off and it's not going to intensify anymore. Now, certainly that's not going to help us a whole lot, but if we can at least keep it from intensifying even more, at least that's a little bit of good news out of a very, very bad situation. Notice the movement with this right now. It's also turned, made that turn more towards the north-northeast right now at 14 miles an hour. So we've been talking about for days, we'd be watching for that little bit of a turn, and exactly where that happened would really help to hone in exactly where this makes landfall, and it has made that turn right now. Winds are at 145 miles an hour, 29.4. 86 degrees west, even as this makes its way up into southwestern Georgia. Look at that. It is still a Category 2 hurricane. It will continue to weaken, but even as it works its way over the Carolinas and out over water, this could still be a tropical storm at that point, and then transitions out over the Atlantic as an extratropical system. Winds continue to go up, and remember, it has not made landfall as of this recording. 68 mile an hour wind gusts in Apalachicola, 40 in Panama City. So all these areas will continue to watch these winds going up, conditions going down very, very rapidly at this point. So wind speeds, the yellow shade, that is the extent of the tropical storm force winds. Then you have the hurricane force winds working their way through the Panhandle up into Georgia. It continues to weaken, but still, this is going to cause widespread problems, not only with the winds, the surge, but the heavy rainfall that will occur with this across Georgia and up into the Carolinas. Look at these wave heights. Just amazing. And these are now starting to work their way onshore across the Panhandle and up into the Big Bend. Remember, much of this coastline, very shallow water. So we tend to funnel a lot of this water, not only along the coastline are we talking about the surge, but a mile or two inland is going to be affected by this surge as well. And there you see along the coastline, 8 to 10 up to 12 feet of surge pushing a mile or two inland as we go through the day today. Even along our coastline, and especially as we cycle towards the high tide cycles, we're going to see that flooding up into parts of Pinellas County, up in the Citrus County, and also throughout Tampa Bay. We've been seeing throughout the past couple of high tide cycles, those above normal tides causing some of that flooding. So still a extremely dangerous situation unfolding across the Panhandle. We're going to keep you updated right here on myfoxhurricane.com.
And now, Fox 13 meteorologist Dave Osterberg with your Sky Tower radar forecast.
Yesterday morning at this time, we had a Category 1 hurricane. This morning, it's a Category 4, and it has strengthened overnight to now 140 mile per hour winds right around the center of the storm. And I tell you, I'll bet that 140 mile per hour winds is right here on this eastern side. You see all that lightning? The lightning continues in and around the center. It's just a sign of intensification. The fact that it walled itself off, this eye wall became solid overnight. And I'm going to show you the satellite presentation in just a second, and it is just an impressively powerful storm. I mean, unfortunately, Yes, it's got to go somewhere, and it's still headed toward the Panhandle. Now, tropical storm force winds go out like 175 miles or so to maybe about here. So we're not going to get sustained tropical storm force winds. The biggest problem in our area, as we've stated, are the high tides. We had flooding this morning at our high tide. The tides are on their way out now. When they come back in this afternoon, folks, we're going to have those same roads that are probably going to be flooded. So just keep that in mind. We've also got a few showers, although it's nothing significant. These little bands of rain that are wrapped around the very outer edge of the storm. So from Sarasota northward all the way up through Pinellas County, we're going to be dealing with a little bit of squally weather for the morning hours. Inland locations, really nothing more than a little bit of breeze and a sprinkle. Here's the storm. It's been moving north. It's going to start to turn more toward the northeast in response to this. Here's a trough of low pressure out in the plain states moving eastward, and that's going to help to shove it more toward the northeast, which is why we're thinking this afternoon you're looking at, you know, maybe 2 o'clock or so, a landfall close to or just to the east of Panama City. Little pinhole eye. I mean, this storm is huge. But not only that, many storms that get into the Gulf that reach Category 5 status or 4 or 5 status will then quickly start to weaken as they approach the coast. This one is intensifying as it approaches the coast. So it's running out of time to weaken. It's running out of time to have what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. So this storm is likely going to move on shore, you know, as a Category 4, at the very least a 3, and go down as one of the strongest storms, if not the strongest storm the Panhandle has ever seen, going back to 1851. It's just huge. So there's your 140 mile per hour winds based at 5 o'clock this morning, moving north at 13. The pressure. Remember we talked about this yesterday. The lower the number gets, the stronger the storm. This number continues to drop, a sign, of course, that the storm is continuing to strengthen. It is expected to be very close to the coast this afternoon with winds of 145 miles per hour, move on shore, still be a hurricane in the middle of Georgia. First thing tomorrow morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning. Could you imagine that? And then become a tropical storm as it moves through the Carolinas. Look at the water that it's bringing with it. Okay, 28-foot seas. So what's going to happen now is you're going to start to see this water funneling up into Appalachia Bay, which is just perfectly shaped to have a huge storm surge move miles inland. The worst of the storm surge is probably going to be right around here. And like I said, hopefully everybody's gone. Now, this is a sparsely populated area around here, the Big Bend area. There are a few small towns, but the population starts to increase again once you get to Apalachicola, Panama City, and then further west. So I'm hoping that everybody listened and they got out. Our issues, but we had some issues this morning with some flooding on the high tide, and then during the afternoon high tide, the same thing is going to happen, folks. So just let's keep that in mind, okay? 2 to 4 feet higher than our normal tide causes some roads to be flooded in Tampa Bay area, and then up to Citrus County, they'll get the worst of it as their storm surge will be in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 feet, and that's why the storm surge warning is out from Pasco County to the north. That's the impact on our area. Overall, obviously, compared to the Panhandle, it will be minimal, but we'll have a few passing squalls near the coast today. We got 88 for your high. Tonight, mostly cloudy. It'll be windy. It'll be 78 for a low. Maybe a few more showers tomorrow. Nothing significant, though, with a high of 88 degrees. And then, believe it or not, Friday comes. Drier air moves in, and it'll be a warm weekend, but it'll be a comfortable weekend. Look at Saturday morning's low, which is going to be in the upper 60s. So, but again, you know, the theme this morning is a much, much stronger storm headed straight for the Panhandle in a few hours, okay?
Bracing for impact, Hurricane Michael reaches Category 4 status.
This storm is fast approaching. The people here are in grave danger.
And in their lust for power, the Democrats, they've gone crazy.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for.
If the Democrats
do not retake the House. I really think they may lose it all.
The president has told reporters that he has 5 people on a short list to replace Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
It's just very important for government officials to understand when it's time to step aside.
The Media Research Center just released a study that found 92% of the coverage of the president over the summer was negative, which is an outstanding number.
2, bouncing ball, going to be a tough play. Nunez gloves, throws, and time. The Boston Red Sox win the division series.
This is a Fox News alert. Look at that number right there. Hurricane Michael, now a Category 4 monster storm, packing 140-mile-an-hour winds as the outer bands of the storm are starting to lash the Panhandle and the Gulf Coast.
They say it's extremely dangerous. We have team live coverage. Janice Dean is keeping a close eye on that hurricane, which could be the area's strongest landfall in 13 years.
Yep, and we have live team coverage too. But we start with Griff Jenkins. He's at Alligator Point in Florida. Hey, Griff.
Good morning, guys. We are hours from the eye coming in east to our west in Panama City, but on the east side of where it is expected to make landfall, the storm surge is a grave threat along Alligator Point where we are. This is the Gulf of Mexico behind me, and homes just like this are in serious threat of being entirely washed away. And the reason why, guys, is because the combination of unprecedented possible 12 to 14 foot storm surge along with the miles and miles, upwards of 40, 50, 60 miles of shallow water in the Gulf behind us, washing into this area with a Cat 4 storm and going into the low-lying marsh areas all the way 30, 40 miles due north to Tallahassee. This area is guaranteed to flood. That is why in Franklin County and Wakulla County, the officials have said that you must get out. And just moments ago, before we went live, along this road I want to show you quickly, we just saw people that we met yesterday rushing out of here. We asked them to stop and talk to us. They said, we've got to go. We're heading west and north as fast as we can. This road washed out on a much smaller nothing burger hurricane, Hurricane Hermine, 2 years ago, but it did do unbelievable damage because of that shallow water and storm surge, which was just a few feet, nothing like the 12 to 14 coming very quickly. I just want to give you Lieutenant Chris Savory with an urgent message for what the dirty side's going to do to this area.
We're going to be on the dirty side of the storm, and we're going to be in it for a while. A lot of people forget that it's not just going to go straight when it hits land. It's going to take a turn back towards the east. Well, that keeps us on that side, and it just lengthens any kind of horrible conditions that we're going to be facing.
And so we're going to throw it back to you. We're not going to stay here very long because once the winds pick up, the storm surge will follow and it won't be safe here. But anybody in this area on the Big Bend sector that still has a chance to go, you got to go right away. It may even be too late.
That's a horror show.
Steve, Ainsley?
That's a horror show behind you, Griff. I don't know if you can realize how close these waves are to you.
Well, we wanted to give you a look because we feel fairly safe at this point because this is the precursor. It's 100 miles or more out to sea. But, boy, it's going to change fast, and you do not want to be in it. And, really, the people that tried to stay behind because they're worried about their property, don't worry about your property anymore. You can get more property. You can't get another life.
Exactly right. All right, Griff, get back in the truck and get going. Somebody who is riding the storm out is Mike Huckabee, who lives not too far from there. He built a new house up to hurricane standards a couple of years ago. He will be joining us live from his house in 20 minutes.
I have a friend, her parents have a house right there on the beach that we used to stay in when we all went to college at Florida State. And she just started building her house last Friday. She sent me a picture of what it looks like. And a lot of it is, the structure's already there.
Yeah, tape everything before you leave. Janice Dean is with us. Janice, you've been tracking the storm all night.
So to give you perspective on this, Category 4 hurricane has hit the state of Florida 10 times, Cat 4. This part of the state has never, ever been hit by a Category 4 storm. So this is historic for them. They've never felt something like this. 140-mile-per-hour sustained winds, and the storm is expected to still strengthen as it impacts the Florida Panhandle as well as the Big Bend, because the worst side of the storm is going to the east side of the storm. So they're going to get the worst of the storm surge, in some cases 14 to 15 feet, which will put homes and towns underwater. And that's going to be the dangerous part of the storm, in addition to heavy rain rainfall, in addition to hurricane force winds for hours and the tornado threat as well. We have one. I just want to show you, this is the Saffir-Simpson scale. We are Cat 4 here, 140 miles per hour. So we are a strong Cat 4, not just a minimal one. And this will be a catastrophic wind event. Catastrophic wind event. So as we go through time, expecting landfall somewhere between 1 and 3 p.m., making impact on the Florida Panhandle, but the results are going to be felt not only for Florida, but parts of Georgia, Alabama, up towards the Carolinas with heavy rainfall, heavy rain impact. Tornado watch already in place. We could see dozens of tornadoes, weak tornadoes, but ones that could cause structural damage. So this is obviously a big story. The tornado threat will extend into Georgia and parts of South Carolina. And some of the areas that were affected by Florence will also be affected by rainfall. The storm surge, though, by the way, will be historic in this area. And that's what's going to put all of these areas underwater.
All right. On the dirty side of the storm, as they say, Janice, thank you very much, 8 to 12 feet. We're going to be talking to the governor of the state of Florida. Rick Scott's going to be joining us live at 7:20 to give us the very latest, because Florida, the Panhandle, is getting ready for Mike.
And I know we got to worry about the hurricane, and that's first and foremost, but it's also an audition for all the candidates. Senator Rick Scott wants to be Senator Rick Scott. People want to see how he handles the state. Ron DeSantis has a chance to get his hands dirty in Florida and show some leadership, maybe by his side. And then you got Gillum, who's running to the Democratic side. He's got to worry about Tallahassee. So what kind of mayor? How is he going to act under pressure? This all, meanwhile, they're not campaigning at all during a key point in the midterms.
Well, you kind of still are, because the state is watching how you're going to handle the storm, what your reaction is going to be, if you're going to be out there helping the people, if you're going to get evacuations out in time. It can hurt or help them.
The last report at the airport, 82 mile per hour before the anemometer was blown out. And that's the latest here in Apalachicola, as the winds are still howling, still persistent. And we're going to be moving, I think, locations here to try to find a better spot, as I'm trying to also figure out what is all this stuff in the water, all sorts of debris. So let's go back now. I believe we're going to go to Panama City Beach to Stephanie. So let's go back to Stephanie. Steph.
Okay, Chris, this is the worst wind we've seen. And I'm looking at the radar on my phone. And what I've noticed is that we are getting right into the outer portion of some of the worst weather. And you can tell a difference, can't you? I mean, even from just 15 minutes ago. So this wind field is expanding a little bit, especially on the west side. Woo, we can catch our breath. While we catch our breath, Dr. Nab has some breaking news with this historic hurricane. Dr. Nab, take it away.
Yeah, we have an official statement from the Hurricane Center with their intermediate public advisory that we have the official landfall of the center of Hurricane Michael. Winds had continued to increase all the way up till the time of landfall, set at miles per hour, just below what would be a Category 5 hurricane, and pressure of 919 millibars. Talk about making history on the Florida Panhandle. This is certainly doing that at 30.0 north, 85.5 west at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. Now that's near Mexico Beach, Florida, but we should get a little bit more specific than that, because Mexico Beach itself, the community where the population is in the full brunt, probably the strongest from there, the community of Allenton is just in here, that they could get the passage of the center nearby there, and it'll be going over East Bay. So tech to do so, and right up there close to the Category 5 threshold. This is going to be a catastrophic outcome for a number of communities, and the storm surge values continue to come up. We don't have a gauge at Mexico there. The wind and the storm surge and the waves appear to be wreaking havoc, but it's really difficult to see what the outcome has been, simply because it's like blizzard conditions, it looks like on the video. And Port St. Joe, St. Joseph Bay, Apalachicola, certainly getting hurricane conditions and storm surge. And then on the northwest side, that's where Panama City Beach are. They're getting the northwestern and now the western eye wall, and Tyndall Air Force Base has been eking in just on the inside of the western portion of the eye. But this is moving along, and so the places that are experiencing the eye, before too long, the backside is going to come roaring ashore. And so, when the eye, the center of the eye passes over any given location, the event is only half over. And there are going to be a number of locations that receive that eastern eye wall, Stephanie. You're in the western eye wall, and it's been pretty bad there, too, as well.
I have a question for you, Nab, and it's just a technicality thing. The wind field is expanding a little bit, I think, because of that friction. You can correct me if I'm wrong on my analysis there. But you mentioned the western eye wall. Would you technically call what we are in the western eye wall, or would you say it's like the outer fringes?
No, well, the closer you are to the center and the eastern side of Panama City, the more you would be in the bona fide eye wall. Panama City Beach, kind of on the external part of the eye wall, but yes, you're getting the western eye wall, and it's not going to be as strong there as it is on the eastern and southeastern eye wall that are still affecting Mexico Beach.
So let's talk about that a little bit here. And Dr. Nab, I don't know if you have to go or not go, but that eastern eye wall, why it's so strong, why we fear that eastern wall, and it has to do with the movement of the storm and also rotation of the storm. You get that double southerly flow on the east side versus that northerly wind, and we got that, Dr. Nab. I mean, our wind, I got to tell you, obviously the beaches to the south just behind us, that wind has been from the north, I would say north-west for, a while now, for a long duration.
Yeah, there are a number of different things going on the coast on the eastern and southeastern eye wall as opposed to the western northwestern eye wall. For one thing, you've got the forward motion of the storm in play there with the winds blowing toward the coast with an exposure from the Gulf of Mexico. So it's an onshore flow into Mexico Beach. But in Panama City Beach, you're getting the flow coming from land. And so friction is slowing down the sustained winds. Certainly you're going to get really strong gusts, but the sustained winds are slower coming off of land on the western side, and they're faster coming off the water at Mexico Beach. And Mexico Beach has an open exposure all the way out to the Gulf. Not even a barrier island is there. And that's why they also have an open fetch to get a maximized storm surge there at Mexico Beach. So it's the wind and the water, I fear, are going to leave some slabs there where houses used to be in Mexico Beach.
Absolutely. We were going to stay originally in Mexico Beach, but we didn't find anything we felt confident in staying in there. We found something a little more confident in Port St. Joe, but that's why I left this morning. I was worried about that exposure with the winds coming straight off the water like that. Now, speaking of winds coming straight off the water, Jim has made his way to the other side of the hotel to check in on the beach. So, Jim, tell the viewers what has happened since you left and went back. What kind of change have we seen? And he can confirm it. Sorry, I'm just watching the radar here with this system. He can confirm that he said, Abrams, the water's come up. If you were watching the shots earlier, it would say Reynolds, Wolf, or Jim this morning. That water was coming up right to the dunes. He said they have not seen it really crashing over. Now, there's a pier. We've been showing you that also on TV, social media, the whole thing. I can't report on the pier right now. Maybe Jim can get a look at it when he's over there. I'll try to do my best to get a look at it for you right now. But the waves were going basically right up to where that pier was. Now, this thing, I'm telling you, there are people right now in the center of this that are feeling a complete calm. But Panama City, they are getting crushed. And remember, Mexico Beach, in that eastern eye wall right now, I can't even imagine what it's like. Remember, we are like on the outer fringes of the eye wall, if you will. Okay? They are going through a Category 4 eye wall straight off the water in Mexico Beach. The water certainly has been pushed and inundated that Highway 98. But the fact that it's moving quick. Oh, look at the roof. Oh, you see it? There's big slabs of the tar coming up. Here we go with a big gust. There it is, coming in. There's that big gust. Yep. I'm trying to take a wind off with these coming in. Did it go? That roof went? Okay. That's really the only debris that we have seen so far is that roof and then little pieces of debris. People here took this storm very seriously. Everyone's boarded up. And I can't report any significant debris. I can't report any flooding that we've seen here. But Panama City, sitting in the winds, higher than what we're seeing right now consistently. Let's see if we can get another wind observation. I know this is not official. I know it's just a small instrument, but the winds do those gusts and then it calms back down. And again, a gust is just an instant thing. They are getting sustained winds, at least 78 miles an hour, as you go over towards the Port St. Joe area. And there are some, older homes, maybe the newer homes are built up to hurricane-type codes and whatnot. But even if they are built up to code, you guys see what I'm in. And it's just nothing compared to what the worst of this has to offer. So, of course, we're thinking of all those people going through the worst of it right now. The only good thing with this, I even hate to use that word good because there's nothing good with a hurricane, but it is moving fairly quickly. So that is the good news associated with this hurricane. This is not moving at 5 miles an hour. It's not moving at 6 miles an hour. This thing has been, double digits, 12, 13 miles an hour. That's how fast it's been going. So that's always a good thing that you get less flooding. All right, I'm told we have Cantori back. Jim, if you can hear me, I just wanted you to give a detailed report, perhaps on the beach and also the pier. Have you been able to see the pier?
Yes, I can. Barely. But Steph, the wind on this side, the winds are coming right down the beach, and they're probably hitting the hotels a little bit here. So they're incredibly strong coming through this area here. The good news is the winds are just slightly offshore enough so that we're blowing the water back out. All right, so the water's blowing back out. I tried to get down on the beach with my cameraman, but the sand is relentless. I mean, because... Hold on, guys. Just give me a second here. Hey, give me that helmet. Give me the helmet. Give me the helmet. Yeah, we got it. Hold this. What is here? My thinking is that Panama City, and certainly from what I saw before we walked around this side, gusted over 100 miles per hour. We had a lot of gusts. Tyndall Air Force Base, Mexico Beach. Some of these observations, we've got some FSUs out there taking measurements as well. With anemometers that they're putting up. Wow. So this is what it feels like. Going through the eye wall. Man. I mean, we got white caps on the pool back here. All right? Just gonna catch my breath for a second. All right. We know the eye's coming ashore. We've got some unofficial pressure measurements down in the 920 millibar range. And even if this came in officially with 928, that's 10 millibars lower than Hazel. 10 millibars, one of the strongest low pressure systems that ever has come north, certainly even in the Gulf of Mexico, in any month. All right, so very, very strong storm. We're below Harvey, we're below Hugo with the pressure here. This is a big, big storm, and no question, it is pushing now all the water down toward Appalachia Bay. So their winds are still very much onshore. Those winds are onshore. And so it's pushing all this water up to you. Again, guys, it appears that we've lost power. At last report, about 145,000 customers without power. That number's probably gone up exponentially, especially with this eye wall coming ashore. Every once in a while, we'll get a little lull in the wind. You can stand back up, but we're also getting some pretty strong gusts, too, around the other side of this hotel. This is a dangerous hurricane. dangerous hurricane. We'll continue to cover it for you. Guys, stick around. This storm has a lot of wind energy. Tallahassee, Valdosta, Albany, Savannah. This is coming your way.
Hurricane Michael live updates, Category 4 storm lashes Florida. Conditions deteriorate in Florida Panhandle as unprecedented Category 4 Hurricane Michael nears landfall. Major Hurricane Michael, an unprecedented storm, is bearing down on the Florida Panhandle as an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane. Michael is expected to make landfall near Panama City, Florida, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. CDT Wednesday. Should Michael's eye cross the coast as a Category 4 hurricane, it would be the first time on record for such an occurrence over the Big Bend area of Florida's coast, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Alex Sosnowski. Michael is a historic storm. A Category 4 hurricane has never struck that part of Florida. The coastline will be changed for decades, AccuWeather Vice President of Forecasting and Graphics Operations Marshall Moss said. The storm will bring sustained winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour with gusts of 120 to 160 miles per hour to parts of the Florida Panhandle, mostly within 40 miles of where Michael makes landfall. The strongest gusts are likely just to the east of the center. This will lead to widespread tree and structural damage. States of emergency have been declared in parts of Florida, Georgia, Alabama and the Carolinas. Mandatory evacuations are in effect along much of Florida's northern Gulf Coast. Several thousand power outages and tropical storm force wind gusts have already been reported in parts of northwestern Florida. There may be prolonged power outages that could last for several days. Wind damage will be on a more localized level as Michael moves across the Carolinas and Virginia. However, any weakened structures left behind from Florence will be at the highest risk for damage. The last Category 4 hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. in October was Hurricane Hazel, which slammed the Carolinas in 1954.
Now, Fox 13 meteorologist Dave Osterberg with your Sky Tower radar forecast.
Yesterday morning at this time, we had a Category 1 hurricane. This morning, it's a Category 4, and it has strengthened overnight to now 140 mile per hour winds right around the center of the storm. And I tell you, I'll bet that 140 mile per hour winds is right here on this eastern side. You see all that lightning? The lightning continues in and around the center. It's just a sign of intensive the satellite presentation in just a second, and it is just an impressively powerful storm. I mean, unfortunately, yes, it's got to go somewhere, and it's still headed toward the Panhandle. Now, tropical storm force winds go out like 175 miles or so to maybe about here. So we're not going to get sustained tropical storm force winds. The biggest problem in our area, as we've stated, are the high tides. We had flooding this morning at our high tide. The tides are on their way out now. When they come back in this afternoon, folks, we're going to have those same roads that are probably going to be flooded. So just keep that in mind. We've also got a few showers, although it's nothing significant. These little bands of rain that are wrapped around the very outer edge of the storm. So from Sarasota northward all the way up through Pinellas County, we're going to be dealing with a little bit of squally weather for the morning hours. Inland locations, really nothing more than a little bit of breeze and a sprinkle. Here's the storm. It's been moving north. It's going to start to turn more toward the northeast in response to this. Here's a trough of low pressure out in the plain states moving eastward, and that's going to help to shove it more toward the northeast, which is why we're thinking this afternoon you're looking at, you know, maybe 2 o'clock or so, a landfall close to or just to the east of Panama City. Little pinhole eye. I mean, this storm is huge. But not only that, many storms that get into the Gulf that reach Category 5 status or 4 or 5 status will then quickly start to weaken as they approach the coast. This one is intensifying as it approaches the coast. So it's running out of time to weaken. It's running out of time to have what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. So this storm is likely going to move on shore, you know, as a Category 4, at the very least a 3, and go down as one of the strongest storms, if not the strongest storm the Panhandle has ever seen, going back to 1851. It's huge. So there's your 140 mile per hour winds based at 5 o'clock this morning, moving north at 13. The pressure. Remember we talked about this yesterday. The lower the number gets, the stronger the storm. This number continues to drop. A sign, of course, that the storm is continuing to strengthen. It is expected to be very close to the coast this afternoon with winds of 145 miles per hour. Move on shore, still be a hurricane in the middle of Georgia. First thing tomorrow morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning. Could you imagine that? And then become a tropical storm as it moves through the Carolinas. Look at the water that it's bringing with it. Okay, 28-foot seas. So what's going to happen now is you're going to start to see this water funneling up into Appalachia Bay, which is just perfectly shaped to have a huge storm surge move miles inland. The worst of the storm surge is probably going to be right around here. And like I said, hopefully everybody's gone. Now, this is a sparsely populated area around here, the Big Bend area. There are a few small towns, but the population starts to increase again once you get to Apalachicola, Panama City, and then further west. So I'm hoping that everybody listened and they got out. Our issues, but we had some issues this morning with some flooding on the high tide. And then during the afternoon high tide, the same thing is going to happen, folks. So just let's keep that in mind, okay? 2 to 4 feet higher than our normal tide causes some roads to be flooded in Tampa Bay area. And then up to Citrus County, they'll get the worst of it as their storm surge will be in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 feet. And that's why the storm surge warning is out from Pasco County to the north. That's the impact on our area. Overall, obviously, compared to the Panhandle, it will be minimal, but we'll have a few passing squalls near the coast today. We got 88 for your high. Tonight, mostly cloudy. It'll be windy. It'll be 78 for a low. Maybe a few more showers tomorrow. Nothing significant, though, with a high of 88 degrees. And then, believe it or not, Friday comes. Drier air moves in, And it'll be a warm weekend, but it'll be a comfortable weekend. Look at Saturday morning's low, which is going to be in the upper 60s. So, but again, you know, the theme this morning is a much, much stronger storm headed straight for the Panhandle in a few hours, okay?
Bracing for impact, Hurricane Michael reaches Category 4 status.
This storm is fast approaching. The people here are in grave danger.
And in their lust for power, the Democrats, they've gone crazy.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for.
If the Democrats do not retake the House, I really think they may lose it all.
The president has told reporters that he has 5 people on a short list to replace Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
It's just very important for government officials